Hi, my name's KOMATHI STEM, and I'm with monARC Bionetworks. Been in the industry over 25 years, and I've never been more excited than I am today at the opportunity that we have to actually partner directly with patients. And so I'd like to just walk you through some trends that I think that are happening, as well as some opportunities that exist for us to lay the framework for the rest of the couple days. So the current state where we are still running randomized clinical trials, patients are still passive consumers. Sure, the data is clean and it's structured and it's a lot easier to analyze, but it's still very limited, not as generalizable, very expensive, very time-consuming, and highly proprietary, which really limits the ability for us to do more with the data if we could actually free it from all of the silos that it's in right now. So I'd like to just kind of walk through maybe three big trends that I see. The first one is the point of care is shifting, not from the clinic to the home, but from the clinic to the smartphone. How many of you today use your phone for healthcare purposes? Tracking? How many of you actually have done a telemedicine visit using your smartphone? It's an amazing experience. You should all do it. But 95% of Americans have a cell phone, and over 77% actually have a smartphone. And 20% actually have online access only through a smartphone, which actually is a really interesting point because it actually gives us access to more populations that we've never had access to before because they have not had access to the internet or not have had access to our traditional centers. 75% of physicians are already using mobile tools in their clinic, and 75% of patients are willing to use mobile tools or telemedicine to engage in practice. This is the new clinical care setting, and if we continue to develop drugs in our traditional brick and mortar medium, we're going to be developing tools and drugs for a market that's completely different. And there's the potential for drugs to fail because they're not being used in the context in which they were developed. The next big thing is data is abundant, but highly siloed and noisy, which I know you guys all know. There's 83% EHR adoption in the US, and there's a variety of data beyond the EHR. There's your smartphone that's generating data. People are starting to wear wearable sensors. There's social media data, all kinds of different data that's coming at us. It's very complex, variety, variability. There's a lot coming at us. But interoperability still is a huge issue. We still rely on a business model that is based on patent protection and IP. So therefore, we hold the data. We get incentives to publish, so we don't share the data. So there's a lot of challenges around interoperability and bringing that data together. And certainly security and some of the legislation around HIPAA, all of that is limiting our potential of what we could do with this abundant data that exists out there. And then finally, there's the mindset shift that needs to happen, and that is that data access is more important than ownership. Because ultimately, accessing a variety of data streams, integrating them, and having the new capabilities to mine them is really what matters. It's what delivers value. And new tech players like Amazon and Facebook and Apple, they've learned this in other industries. They don't worry about owning the data. They figure out how to get access to it and generate new ways and new insights out of it and new value that they bring directly to their end user. We should be doing this in healthcare. We should be doing this in drug development. So the big opportunity here is patients could be the most important partner that you have moving forward. So first of all, patients are ideal aggregators of real-world data. They actually are owning quite a bit of the data. If you think beyond the traditional data, they're developing sensors, sensor data, social media data. They are the owners of that data. And they have unprecedented access to the data. The HIPAA legislation now is if you ask for your records in 30 days, you should get them. So the patient is at the center of a variety of data streams, and they're going to give you access to that data because 96% are willing to share their data, provided adequate control of security and trust. What are you going to do with that data? Is it going to be a greater purpose, or are you going to sell it to my insurance company and my insurance is going to go up? So there's a lot of interesting plays going on, but patients are really the key, the gateway to the data. And I know we've talked a lot about real-world evidence and real-world data, but I'd like to throw out there that real-world insights could be a very valuable tool to help us design more meaningful endpoints, better trial designs, and fundamentally better decision-making, because as in other industries, decision-making is getting pushed to the end user, which is the patient. So using their insights and including them in developing new endpoints and decision-making tools is critical to a successful outcome. And then finally, I'd like to add that patients and consumers expect a continuous real-time engagement on their smartphone. And that means no more package inserts that are static, paper. I know we've trying to move to electronic, but really what the expectation is real time, not data that's a year old, but direct to patient, customized and personalized to that individual patient. This is possible now. The technology is there, the data is there. We just need to work together to bring it together. So what monARC has done is we have developed an integrated real-world data learning platform, and we're following some of the trends that are going. We work directly with patients to generate virtual research networks where patients want to share their data, and we make it simple for them to share their data. Whether it's their EHR data, it's their sensor data, labs or images, we bring that all together, and then we generate deep insights for researchers to utilize in their trial designs and run trials in a much more pragmatic manner. So just to give you a quick example, I know you can't see all the details in this, but the speed in which this is possible, if you engage the patients first, before you start designing your trial and before you activate all your centers for your trial, if you engage the patients first, you actually can accelerate your trial. You'll design better trials that require less amendments. You'll be able to pre-qualify those patients because you have all of their data well in advance, and you can actually run the trial faster. And so you can also use the networks to iterate on different designs and tools that you might want to develop. So in this case, the sponsor wanted to develop the use of home spirometry in a rare lung disease. And they wanted to make sure they tested which devices the patients would use, but also whether the data and the variability of the data is of research grade, so that they could actually consider introducing it into a phase 2 trial and potentially even reduce the sample size because they can do more frequent measurements from the home, directly from the smartphone, versus bringing them into the clinic. But big change requires incentives, and I've always been inspired by the 1983 Orphan Drug Act. That act made a huge difference. Prior to the act, only 10 drugs or 10 indications had been approved. Now there's over 650. Incentives make a big difference. Next generation drug development, direct-to-patient drug development, needs incentives for data sharing across researchers and sponsors, incentives for sponsors and researchers to spend time to invest and develop novel endpoints. Often there's a rush to get your product developed into the market and not the willingness to develop new endpoints, yet that could, if they took a little time to do that, they could accelerate. And then, using the smartphone as a point of care, highly limited by the telemedicine laws that we have in the US, as well as drug shipment laws, and a lack of clarity and ambiguity in the laws around research. And finally, we need new capabilities with non-traditional partners, social networking, the use of mobile devices and the data, and really being focused on user experience, AI and security, and all of that's being used by some of our non-traditional partners that we interact with on our daily lives. They can be very valuable partners in drug development. And finally, we need to have bold partnerships with patients. I know that there's always a little bit of a hesitancy to interact directly with patients and the need for a firewall, but bold partnership is needed really to move this forward, where we're really leveraging the real world data that they're generating, as well as the insights that can be gained from that, so that we have real evidence to move forward. Thank you. Questions?
I want to ask if you could say a little more about the concept of data access versus data ownership, especially the idea that, you know, in a sort of regulated environment, the idea that data need to be completely regularized and locked down, you know, in a safe so that they could never be touched. And I'm assuming you might have some opinions about that, but I'm wondering how the sort of the need for use of data in regulation could comport with this idea about access rather than ownership and data as a living thing.
Yeah, I think the multi-platform trials, the umbrella trials, are great examples of how I think companies have come together and said, let's develop together. Let's share some of the data. Let's share a placebo arm maybe together or a control arm together. Those are areas where you might be building access. But if you're using patients to give you access to their data, at an individual level, they're going to expect something back. They're not saying they need it right away, so certainly if you're running a randomized clinical trial and you need to, blind the data for a while, they're going to be accepting of that. But at some point, you need to give it back to them in a way that they can understand it, both at an individual level to help with their own care continuum, but also at a population level so they can understand how they fit in. Hope I answered that question for you. Hi.
So from a patient point of view, what's a patient supposed to do? So they could give their data to you, they could give their data to All of Us Research Network at NIH, they could participate in patients like me. Flatiron Health is asking them to give their data for cancer patients. So like you said, that ownership is not an issue, but from a patient point of view, this new ecosystem is very confusing.
That's a great point. Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of different places where they can share their data, but you don't have to share it just once. You can share it in multiple spaces. Just like you might go to multiple grocery stores for different purposes, you can go to different networks for different purposes. There's some that are very community focused, educating and sharing each other's experiences. There's others that are very research focused. So there's different purposes and you can participate in different spaces. But the key is we need to make it simple for patients to do that. If we put all of the work on them, it's not going to work. If you guys recall, when we went from paper to electronic, we put all of the work on the sites and the investigative sites to do the work. We can't do that with patients. That's not going to work. So we have to make it simple.
Hi, let me follow up on that question. I'm Peter Goldschmidt. I'm with the World Development Group. I just wondered if you'd like to elaborate a bit on paying patients for the data they provide.
Great question. I didn't cover that, but I think there's going to come to a day when patients are going to expect to also share in the value that's created by their data. And right now we're in that gray area where we don't want to coerce the patient, but at the same time, I think it's fair for them to say we want to take part in that value, and we need to come up with new mechanisms in which we can do that. And you're starting to see a little bit in the blockchain space where they share tokens. We're looking at how can we donate their participation to a charity of their choice. There's different things that we can do at this point, but I do think that's going to get more and more an issue that we need to address. Great point.
You mentioned the importance of getting information back to the patients in a way that they can understand. Have you taken a position about genetic testing where you can get a genetic results that even the clinicians aren't sure how to interpret? And I'm interested in this because we see a lot of institutional review boards saying we shouldn't share that with the patient because we can't explain it to them. Have you a position on
I don't
this?
know that I've made an absolute position, but I've certainly explored that. And I do believe that a conversation is needed with the patient. Saying that they can't understand it, so therefore we should not share it, does not seem appropriate to me. I think patients are quite smart. And often patients know a lot about their own condition, maybe more than we do because they're living in it. And they've probably researched it and they have access to so much more knowledge now than they ever had before. So I'm a believer that the more you share the data, the more that insights and innovation will come out of it. Whether it's a patient or as a provider, a clinician, or a researcher, you never know where the innovation or the aha moment and insight will come.
So I think they could it's okay to give it to them with the ambiguity that we don't understand yet what this means, but might be useful in the future?
Yeah, I think if you share that there is ambiguity and you're very straightforward about that, some patients may just not like it, but I think you do have to counsel around it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good, thank you.